Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I see some familiar faces here. So some of this might be a little repetitive if you've been to one of our community events before, but I'll give it kind of a short introduction. We've got maybe half a dozen slides to walk through some of the project specifics, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So this is our 6th community event, second one here at the library. To give you a little bit of background, I'm Kevin Champagne. I'm the chair of the Fire Station Building Committee. We've got a few other committee members here tonight: Chief Aaron McKinney, Chris Baker, and Todd Lindmark, and Justin Casanova Davis, as well as Vertex, who's the owner and project manager, Steve Kirby, and the project architect, Ron Lamar from Dillon Whittier. The building committee was formed back in March of 2021 to basically restart the fire station portion of the project in 2016. Obviously, the 2016 project was really two parts: moving the police station to Sharon Avenue, and then updating the fire station. The updating fire station part of the project never occurred because of cost overruns on the police station, which kind of brings us here today. There was fortunately enough money left over that we were able to form this committee, hire an OPM, hire an architect, take a fresh look at the project, determine if we were really going down the right path, and determine what really the best use of the town's money for meeting the department's needs now, as well as the department's needs in the future, so that, you know, a project like this, we can really have a building that everybody's proud of and that will serve the needs of the town really for decades to come. So where we are in the process, right now the project drawings and specifications are currently being bid by subcontractors and general contractors. We're expecting the contractors' bids back just before Christmas. I think it's December 22nd is the actual date. At that time, we'll vet the bids. The lowest responsive bidder will be awarded, or not awarded the project, but we will recommend award the project for that contractor. That number, we're going to show a cost estimate here tonight. In that cost estimate, you will see a construction cost. That is an estimate at this point. That number will be replaced with the actual construction bid number when we come to special town meeting. So the special town meeting is on January 11th. We need a 2/3 vote to approve the project. And then on January 28th is the ballot vote for the project for the actual debt exclusion to pay for the project. So it's really a 2-step process: town meeting vote, and then the debt exclusion vote on the 28th. The 28th is the date you would actually go to the poll. However, there will be early voting at the town clerk's office, and I believe there's going to be mail-in voting as well. The logistics of that, the town clerk would really have more information than me. Touch on some of what we've kind of been doing since March of 2021. As a committee, we've been meeting pretty much every other Wednesday. And then in addition to that, there's been smaller working group meetings that the chief, the architect, and some of the town departments meet at to hash out some of the really nitty-gritty of the building, and then any major decisions that need to be made are brought to the committee meetings on those bi-weekly Wednesdays. Like I mentioned, we've also had community events where we've tried to go through the project. We've given an update to town meeting. So hopefully this project is not coming as a surprise to anyone, but I'm sure there are probably some people in town we haven't been able to reach. We've posted information on the community Facebook page. We have information boards placed around town. To name a few locations, we have one in Town Hall, the Senior Center. I believe there's one at Silla's. There's a few public private locations around town that we allowed us to put them there. Again, it's just an information board, shows a rendering of the proposed project, as well as a QR code. Tonight, if you're interested, you can scan the QR code or go on the website It brings you right to the Fire Station Building Committee portion of the website that has a ton of information on it. We've got the feasibility study we've done. You can watch every meeting that we've had, every committee meeting that we've had since March on there, as well as probably 15 to 20 frequently asked questions that we've had time to time again at community meetings and at our committee meetings, where we've attempted, or I think pretty completely answer some of these questions that may be some of the same questions you have here tonight. So definitely check that out. So with that, I'll kind of go into the slides here. Let's not skip past that first slide. So this first slide is, on the right-hand side, is showing the square footage of our proposed building. You can see the 32,000 square feet, technically 31,998. That was the initial square footage of the building. Essentially, Doran Whittier sat with the committee, sat with the fire chief, and said, here are all the things we want in the building. We did a first pass at laying that all out, and it was 32,000 square feet. Over time, we've been able to right-size the building, make areas more efficient, make areas multifunctional, and also get this net to gross area down, which in layman's terms, basically that's loft space, corridor space, what's some of
the elevator, the stairs, the hallways, mechanical rooms,
basically
shafts for ductwork and pipes.
Space that's not really going to be, it's transitional space. It's not really super functional space. We're able to get that percentage down, as well as make rooms that are multifunctional. The next slide, we can walk through the floor plan a little bit. But all in all, we were able to chop a significant amount of square footage out of the building to get it down to 25,670 square feet, which is what the square footage is today on the plans that are out to bid for construction. The other, the square footages to the left are previous feasibility studies and schematic designs that were done in 2001 and 2015. And the purpose of really listing this is to show that the square footage that we are at is very much in line with the square footages that were back in 2001 and 2015. Obviously, our square footage is higher. There's a few reasons for that. One is there's been numerous code updates since 2001 and even 2015, as well as NFPA updates, requiring clean spaces, decontamination spaces that really require more square footage in the building. The other thing is that these square footages did not include housing all the apparatus that the fire department owns. Whereas the building that we are proposing, every piece of equipment that the town and the fire department owns will be housed inside the apparatus bay.
So as an example, that net to gross, we're at 22%. In 2015, they were at 40. And in 2001, they were at 35. So the reason we were able to fit everything in is our net usable square feet is a lot higher. And the unused square footage from the other projects, ours is a lot lower. So, next slide.
Next slide. So this slide is showing the floor plans. What we're proposing is a two-story building. The first story is all the apparatus-based space, which is here in red. And then is the community and training spaces here on the right. And then the upstairs are the living quarters and the administrative spaces. A couple of things to point out here. We've listed a short list of all the spatial efficiencies that have been gained since we originally started the feasibility study. A couple to touch on here is one, the training room here is going to be a multi-use room. It will also function as a community space, a muster room. There's one more use for this.
Training room and conference room.
Training room, conference room, and community space. On the second floor, we were able to eliminate a significant amount of space by eliminating the locker rooms. and instead have locker alcoves at each bunk room. There are 9 bunk rooms shown on the plan. That is really for twofold. One, currently we have 4 full-time staff staying overnight. The 9 bunk rooms allows some expansion of the department that's inevitably going to happen over the next 20 years. However, it also covers all-call events, which the chief can get into a little bit more if there's questions on that. All-call events are when other towns come to assist us during fire events. Currently, during those calls, they have to sleep on the floor. There's really no space to put them, so those bunk spaces would be used during those times. Some benefits to this facility versus where they're at now. Really, honestly, the biggest one is going to be the quicker response time. As you can imagine, the staff is living in a trailer behind the station. That affects response time. It affects that when there's a call, they have to leave the trailer, traverse a parking lot, which in winter conditions or even rain conditions can be very hazardous, get in the truck, and then leave. This building here gets them all inside the building so that when there's a call event, they're just going downstairs, hopping in the truck, and leaving. One other thing that I'll point out with the spatial efficiencies and the community benefits is a financial efficiency that was that really the department stepped up to give the town. Is when we first started this project, we were looking at improving the trailer that they're currently living in while the project was being built. So the trailer that they're in now, I think, is almost 15 years old, and this is the second temporary trailer that they've been living in. The cost to replace that trailer was somewhere around $500,000. The fire department, really to their credit, said, look, if we can get this project to go forward, we'll continue to live in the trailer that we're living in now, as terrible as the conditions are, so that that $500,000 doesn't become another cost burden to the town and can be applied to the project. So on this slide, we've tried to summarize some surrounding facilities, square footage, and where they're at with some of their use of these facilities. I won't touch on all of these. We can go back to the slide if people have questions. But one, I will, the 2 that I'm going to go over is Medway. Currently has 2 fire stations totaling 14,000 square feet. They've determined that that is grossly inadequate, and they're currently in feasibility study for a new larger station. And the other is Southbridge, who had a debt exclusion of $25 million. As the final design has been developed, the cost has ballooned to $35 million. And so now they're stuck really trying to reduce the size of the building to get to $25 million or go back to another debt exclusion. The reason why I'm bringing those 2 up is, one, we don't want to be faced with what Medway has. The building we have will meet the department's needs today, as well as having some amount for the department to grow in the future. That this is a building that really, over the next 20 to 30 years, the department can grow into. And we can touch on exactly how much of that square footage is dedicated to future space. I think it's 5%. It's a pretty small percentage, but it allows the department to expand, and that 10 years from now, we're not looking to add on to the building. The other is the idea to bid the project now and have that bid in hand when we come to town meeting for the debt exclusion vote was to avoid a situation like what Southbridge is facing, that we didn't want to have a debt exclusion vote based on an estimate, go to bid, for whatever reason, if the bids get delayed, some other reason, the bids come back higher, and now we're back to square one trying to redesign the building. The number that we vote on at special town meeting will be based on the bidded construction cost by the contractor. Go to the next slide.
The other thing that this shows is that the average cost of construction today is $759 per square foot.
So this is a kind of rolled up slide of the project budget. If anybody has questions on any individual line item, we can certainly dive into those more in depth. But couple important things to take out of this slide is, one, what's being presented here is a total project cost. Okay, so the $25 million total project cost is not just the construction cost. The construction cost is $19.5 million. What we've built in here is really any cost that is going to be associated to this project. So OPM fees, architect's fees, site explorations, commissioning for the building envelope and HVAC systems, the furniture that is going to go inside the building, as well as these contingencies, which are really important. Obviously, we think that this is a great design. Unfortunately, no construction project goes totally perfectly. These contingencies are really the town's protection against cost overruns. And if the project does go completely smoothly and we don't need to tap into these contingencies, this is money that is used to pay down the debt exclusion. So this is not money that is already going to be tied into the project. This is basically what we can dip into if unknowns come up, or some, really, I think unknowns is really the biggest piece. This is the town's protection during construction. And then the $3.3 million is the money that's left over from the 2016 project. So based on the $19.5 million, which again is an estimate at this point, that number will be replaced by the contractor's bid. The debt exclusion ask would be around $22 million. Anything else you want to add here, Ron? This is an overall timeline of the project. And we had a committee meeting before this meeting. We're going to really kind of expand this timeline at special town meeting to kind of roll into a lot of the work that was done even before we started schematic design. But January 2022, we started schematic design, and then through October had the different steps of the design process. At each step of the design process, we have met with the select board to make sure that they're okay with the way that the project is proceeding. In October, we went through a contractor pre-qualification process. Because this project is over $10 million, Massachusetts general law requires all contractors bidding on the project to be pre-qualified. So what that means is there was a subcommittee that was formed, 2 committee members, the architect and the OPM, where we essentially vetted every contractor submitted their qualifications to the project, said, here's why we think we're qualified to build this fire station. We vetted all those documents, gave everybody a score. As long as they met a minimum score, they were determined to be pre-qualified. So while the project is out to bid now, only those contractors that were pre-qualified are allowed to bid on the project. November 2022, the project actually went out to bid. Like I mentioned, the project is actually being bid now. Bids are due on December 22nd, and that time's out to have that bid in hand for town meeting. Assuming that the project passes at both town meeting and the ballot vote, we would start construction in the spring, occupy the station in June of 2024. Once the building is occupied, or once the new building is built, the fire department will move into that building, and then we would demolish the existing building. Where the existing building stands today will be landscaped areas as well as a drive aisle and parking lot. So you can see here the outline of the existing fire station. So the location of the proposed fire station was very intentional. It allows the existing building to remain operational during its construction. That saves significant costs on trying to relocate the department to another area in town, and also allows them to keep their response times that they have now being in the center of town. So again, they would basically stay fully functional throughout construction and then move into the new building when it's done, at which time the existing building would be demolished. So the last 3 slides here are renderings of the proposed building. What's shown here is a couple things I want to point out here is, one, You can see there's a large expanse of flat roof. Again, that's intentional. The equipment, there's really no rooftop equipment on the roof, and that is to allow for solar to be installed on the roof surface. The building will be net zero ready, or nearly net zero ready. We really can't obtain net zero without putting solar canopies on the property. Currently, the town bylaws don't allow solar canopies. However, if the bylaws were ever changed, the building is going to be built that we could basically tie into those solar canopies and make the building net zero. Can you go back to the other slide first? We also have green belt. Town bylaws require a 30-foot green belt on all sides that face residential property, which is actually all three sides of the fire station. The church property that is on the west is actually zoned as residential, other than a small sliver up in the corner that was recently changed at the last town meeting. But the green belt is basically being met by new plantings, and the planning board also allowed us to use existing plantings that are along the back of the site and the east side of the site. Last thing is the pitch roofs. So if you go to the next slide, anything that's visible from the road has pitched roofs. Again, that is a town bylaw requirement. So we've had a balance. There's a cost to pitch roofs, so we've minimized the pitch roofs to only where it's visible from the street, and then left the rest of the roofs flat. It's a less expensive way to build a roof, and allows obviously the solar panels to be installed. That's really kind of I don't know if that was really all that brief, but an overview of where are in the project. I don't know if there's anyone from the committee, or Ron or Steve, that want to add anything. Otherwise, we can open up to questions from the audience. Sure.
Yeah, you're getting bids in an inflationary environment.
Can you just introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah, Bob Valley, 93 Red Maple Run in Norfolk.
Sure.
You're getting bids in an inflationary environment, probably not great timing. How confident are you that your estimate is to take that into account? And how confident are you that you're going to account for that in the numbers you have here?
Yeah, so we've, Steve's firm, the OPM on the project, Vertex, they've used an estimator, and we've used an estimator, and both estimators have reconciled at every step of the way: schematic design, design development, and then the construction documents. And our firm and Steve's firm and those estimators, every day we've got other projects that are coming in, right? So we see the numbers on the bids, so we're able to stay up in front of that. Steve, I don't know if you want to talk about the last recent results you've had, and you've had some good favorable.
Yeah, we've had some bids, actually had some bids come in today that were under budget. But one thing to add to what Ron said is the cost estimators, they're not estimating these projects to win them. They're estimating the projects to give us a good budget. We fully expect to have bid savings on bid day. And like I said, we've gotten a few bids in the last couple of weeks, and they have been under the budget, in around 5 to 6% below the budget. So it's taken a little while because of pandemic issues and the supply chain issues, but the estimators seem to have locked in on what the bidding market is at this point. So we're feeling fairly confident with the number that we have.
How many bids are there?
We've got 6 general contractors who have bid.
Right, so we don't know how many will bid. There were 6 that were pre-qualified, so only those 6 can bid. We don't know if all 6 will bid.
Yeah.
And just to piggyback a little bit more on what Ron and Steve were saying, is that early on, it was really Ron's firm who hires a professional cost estimator to prepare the cost. And then as we get further along in the process, as we got to design development and construction documents, that's when we bring in a second cost estimator. And the two of them pull together independent estimates and then sit for 3 or 4 hours and go line by line and make sure that the bids are, or their numbers are aligned, so that we can feel very confident in the number. And as Steve pointed out, the idea is not to have that number be the low bid. They want to be the average bid. And We may get some bids that are higher, some bids that are lower. We're trying to get a reasonable number, and which also includes escalation, because obviously the project is not going to be completed until 2024. Contractors are going to build that into their numbers, that they're probably not going to purchase every piece of material the day they're awarded the project. And so the cost estimators will also build in cost escalation into their estimate.
So one thing you see here back on the schedule slide is that they're scheduled to start work on site in April. So the frost will be out of the ground, no need for temporary heat. And between February 3rd and April 15th, they're still going to be under contract. And we are going to ask them to get all their submittals in and buy everything, right? For two reasons. Number one, the procurement issues that folks have heard about. You wait too long to order something, and then it takes too long to actually arrive. And the old town hall site across the street, we've essentially told them that if they leave a vehicular path and a walkway from the road to the old town hall to the storage building, that they can use that site to store their materials. So they get their site, they bring in a storage container, they put their materials in there, they can buy them early, they don't have to wait to see what happens if the price goes up in the future. By procuring it earlier, they can actually get this stuff here. We'll tell them, sure, go ahead, get it here, put it in the container, store it, and then you'll have it on site. So that February 3rd to April 15th timeframe, that allows them not to be spending money to have someone sit out here on site during the winter, but actually do their office work, get all these things procured, get all their contracts let out, get the materials and the submittals in, allows them to focus on that. They don't have to lose focus trying to build in the winter.
And we've started to do that on all the projects just because of the supply chain, long lead time issues, because some of the projects we have under construction now, items like generators or electrical equipment, they're over a year lead time from the time that they're released. So if you have a project that's only got a year duration, you're already setting up to be delayed. So we're anticipating that at this point. Sort of a lessons learned over the last year or so.
Ken Nelson, 12 Medway Street. One of the bullet points that you had up there was that the station would be NFPA compliant. Does the NFPA actually have standards for new construction for fire stations?
They do. Here it is. So the NFPA, two things. One, in Massachusetts, you have to follow the NFPA fire code. NFPA also has their own building code, which Mass does not follow. But the fire code is the fire code, and NFPA also ties into the electrical code. In 2019, 2020, and then updated again in 2022, you've heard about cancer in firefighters, you've heard about the contamination issues with firefighters. They've come out now and they are requiring, under their standard, that you have a safe facility. So what that means is, if we go back to the floor plan, when Kevin was talking about decontamination space, these spaces were not in your previous designs. So now the way the NFPA lays this out is you have what's considered a green space, which means you're okay, no issues. Then there's a yellow space, right? And then there's the red space, and the red space means you have to decontaminate in there. And so you also have to have separation between the green space, the yellow space, and the red space. So that's the NFPA compliance that we really focus on during the programming, the planning piece of this, to make sure, of course, it's going to have a fire alarm, and of course, it's going to be a safe building, but it's going to actually be a healthy building for the fire department. And that's the twist to the NFPA, where they started saying, it's not just about life safety, it's about healthy buildings and keeping the firefighters healthy. So their code has those updates in it, and we'll actually, for town meeting, we will revise that to actually tell people it's NFPA 2015, and so you'll be able to see that. But that's what we're really trying to comply with now.
Thank you.
Ladies before
Yeah, exactly.
I've spoken to a number of
Sorry,
neighbors.
Peter Lang.
Oh, sorry, Ann Kramer, 47 Tucker Road. I've spoken to a number of people around in our area, and most people seem to agree that we need a better fire station than what we have, but the cost is really scaring people. And the number, I guess, in one of your earlier meetings, the number, someone asked about the impact on the tax rate and the $500. That's the number that I heard passed around. That's probably long before you even had a final price, I don't know. But this is a real concern. And then people start to worry, is the same thing going to happen at for the fire department that happened in the police station, where we went way over the estimate? And where is that going to put all of us when now we need a school? So these are the things that are going to come up, and it would be good at your next January meeting, if you haven't already done this, is to plan to be able to give an idea to people, what is it going to cost to the average taxpayer in Norfolk? Even if it's just an estimate.
So, yeah, so we are going to have a slide that breaks it all down, and what's that?
Keep going, doing great.
I'll turn it over to Todd in a minute, but
It's your job.
so Todd does have some information we can go over tonight, and we presented it at the advisory board meeting last night as well. The numbers he had is based on our estimated amount. When we meet at town meeting, we will update that based on the actual bid that we received. So we will have the cost to the average household, for the cost per thousand and the cost to the average household. As far as preventing what happened at the police station, we feel really confident in the design that's been put together. The committee, when we were formed back in March of 2021, I was kind of, I applied to be part of the fire station building committee. I honestly thought we might not have that many people on the committee. And we had, I think, 10 people vying for 4 resident spots. And the select board listened to all our presentations and then picked 4 of us. We all have backgrounds in this type of project. So I am a structural engineer by trade. I've worked on the Ashland Public Safety Building. I've worked on the Tewksbury Fire Station, the Marshfield Fire Station. Chris Baker's a geotechnical engineer who works on public projects all the time. Justin Yanosik is a firefighter. He doesn't work in town, but he works in the area, so he has a lot of insight into what's going into this building. And then Aaron Hunt, who's the vice chair, who wasn't here tonight, is also an architect. So really, we tried to focus on people that were knowledgeable of the process, getting residents involved that were knowledgeable of the process. And we felt very confident hiring Vertex and Dora Whittier. These are projects that they've done many, many times over. And the cost estimators that they're using are very qualified cost estimators that we feel very confident that it's a good design and this is a sound number that we're presenting.
And just to clarify, so Chief Kenny, from a process point of view, the previous project had not gone through the amount of vetting and steps that we are at now. So process-wise, this is very different. So the other thing that is very different is that there are contingencies of, I think there's 5% contingencies built in to the different areas of the project. So if we do run into an unknown, or if there's some type of hazard abatement that, first of all, a lot of that work has already been done. There's been exploratory work to make sure or to limit what we may face as an unknown. So we're going into this with a lot of known factors, but even with that, there's still contingency built in so that we're not coming back to the town asking for more money or with an override. The other piece of this is we will have firm bids in hand. It won't be a number or a number based on an estimate or a good idea, which previously the number that was put forth to the town was put forth to the town before schematic or detailed design was even done. It was based off of feasibility study. which is very, very early in the process. So we have refined and done a lot of work since the feasibility piece. In the feasibility piece, the first iteration of this program was 32,000 square feet, for example. Now we have done schematic design, design development, and gone through the process of having construction documents, bid documents done. Now the building envelope is much smaller, the circulation space is much smaller, and we have taken a lot of inefficiencies out of the building and out of the project to eliminate those issues of running into the unknowns or the overruns because things are an afterthought, or because things that we're running into, that we'll run into on that other project with, you know, various things from the construction limitations and having a previous building that was built for another purpose. We are building this purpose-built for what it is and not renovating or remodeling, so we're not going to run into some of those issues or problems that that project ran into. And I think the other piece is just the amount of steps and the amount of vetting that's been done and the amount of detailed work that's been done, you know, and the fact that we built in contingencies protects the town from running into those similar issues and the overruns that were from that previous project. And my hope is, honestly, that the town uses this model moving forward for any large capital type of project, especially with buildings, because what we've been able to do is exactly what you're talking about. We've been able to hit some of those finer points on the site work and those kind of things, which usually, you know, or previously, we didn't have, you know, that information and that level of detail, which led to overruns or change orders, which become expensive. So the amount of detail and work that's been put in is aimed at eliminating those specific things and those overruns and costs that end up burdening us as a town. So there's lots of built-in contingencies, as well as just the amount of detailed work and design work that's been put in over the past year and a half, 2 years, to make sure we don't run into that.
You had a question? Yeah, what's that?
Tony Kennedy, with 7 Margot's Way. I think I heard Kevin?
Yes.
Is it? Yeah, say that the existing building would be demolished,
Yes, that's correct.
and just brainstorming whether or not the town could use that building for something else. For example, DPW could store some of their trucks in the existing garage, or, I mean, the building may have a use to the town.
So this is, the outline of the existing building is here. And so the drainage underneath that open green space, that open green space is actually designed to be the stormwater collection area for the site. And then the other portion of the building that's coming down is part of the apron for the vehicles to drive in. And then the last portion, which is where the apparatus bays are now, that's coming down for the required parking on site. So, you know, part of this whole process has been, if we take this building and we build a new one behind it, and then you can use this building on a temporary basis, driving in and out right there, while this building comes down, the parking lot is built, and the stormwater drainage is completed. And for that reason, although it would be understandably, right, reuse, recycle and reuse, in this particular case, we're going to reuse that space for stormwater collection and parking on site. So the building has to come down in order to support reservation.
If you had the notion that we will keep this building, is it possible to rework the areas that you just talked about,
Yeah.
in order to accommodate, you know, leaving the old building there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So a couple of things. When we started the project, there's a long list of, you know, we really had issues with the existing station, notwithstanding the housing and everything else. One of the issues is when the trucks come back, you can see the apparatus bay right now being so close to the road. And when the trucks come back, they have to stop traffic, get out, back in, back out. So by pushing the building back on the site, the trucks are able to come in and turn around on the site and back in. If we were to take the building, which to your point, we did at one point have a design, right, that had the parking, that had the building oriented in this way, And then can we drive around the existing? When you take a look at the bylaws that the town has in place now, we have to be 50 feet off of that property line. So basically, 50 feet of the site doesn't get touched. 50 feet of this site doesn't get touched. So this blue line that you see here, that's actually, according to the town bylaws, that's the space we have to build in. So when we do that and we take into consideration how is the site going to be used, because within that blue line, you know, we have to have all the things that we just talked about, which is the building itself. And for that reason, both buildings cannot fit on the site. So the studies that were done previously to this had actually looked at another site in town, and then what would it cost to buy that site, what would it cost to develop that site, get utilities to that site, and so forth. And basically what that came back was, and Kevin can speak to this, you know, the committee put together this project, decided that, you know, rather than spend all the money to move the fire station on a temporary basis or to acquire a new site and build it further away from town in terms of response times, it was to keep the building here.
Yeah. I mean, long story short is, if we could repurpose the building, we would, but unfortunately, we need the space to meet the town parking requirements and drainage requirements.
It ultimately becomes a very, very tight site, as large as it looks.
The other thing is, if
The
you
regulations.
feel free to go tour the building, actually, the chief has had several tours. You know, the building's kind of outlived its life since the 1960s. The apparatus bays, although the masonry's cracking, you know, I think things have gotten to the point, you can see the rust in the steel on the outside of the building. And so we did go through an analysis, and if you remember, during the feasibility phase, we did take a look at renovating this and adding on to it, which is what had been done in previous ideas. And the reality is that building, those NFPA codes that we're talking about, and the new codes that have been updated since obviously 2001, 2015, we're looking at wind loads. So our building now withstands 140 mile an hour winds, which is a requirement in this area in Massachusetts. It's a Category 4 building, which is required for a public safety building. None of the existing structure would comply with any of that. And so, you know, for that reason alone, it would be cost prohibitive to try to adapt this building to a Category 4 building. And quite frankly, I think that's what happened at the police station. They took a pre-engineered building and turned it into a Category 4 building, which...
Yeah, just to clarify, what a Category 4 building means is that it has to be essentially a survivable building. So if we have a massive hurricane event or blizzard or, on the off chance, an earthquake, while other buildings may be damaged in town, the fire station and the police station need to be operational. And so there's additional structural design that goes into these buildings to reinforce them, make them stronger than a standard commercial building. That those types of requirements didn't exist back in the 60s when the building was built.
Right.
I just have a real stupid question, but where is Main Street on that picture?
Sure, it's at the top.
Okay, it's at the top.
So Dunkin' Donuts is kind of like where it says existing right there.
So that's
Okay,
and
that's
the
Main
church
Street
parking
there.
lot is here.
Because I thought the existing building was facing Main Street. It looks like it's off to the side now.
It is off to the side.
Yeah.
This is, so if you look at the way the site is right now, there's a driveway here, and then all this is green space.
Yeah, and then it's
Yeah.
just stone.
Okay.
So the new fire station is actually on the piece of property that was purchased between the existing fire station property and the church.
Okay.
Yep.
Ed Graham, 47 Tucker. What is the envelope of this structure going to be? It's not going to be brick, right?
It's not brick.
So what we're using is a urethane siding, so it's a composite siding. It looks, tastes, and smells like wood, but when you walk up and you knock on it, it's rain resistant, water resistant, insect resistant, it doesn't rot. And so that material, then behind that material that you have, so basically it's a same look as wood, if you will, but it just doesn't have any of the maintenance associated with wood. Behind that, we've got the walls insulated to the maximum amount allowed by the code, which is 4 inches of insulation between that and the block and the CMU block and the studs. And so what we have is an envelope, and then obviously the roofs are insulated. The envelope that we have allows us to have an all-electric building that has an energy use intensity of under 34, I think it's maybe even under 32 now, our final model's being done. Kilo BTUs per square foot per year. So everybody says, what does that mean, 32 kilo BTUs per square foot per year? Your existing fire station uses over 100 kilo BTUs per square foot per year. Efficiency, I should say Mass Saves has reviewed the efficiency of the building, and for that reason they're going to give the town incentives. So when this building is completed, when it's built, we've been working very closely with the utility, and their program is the Net Zero Ready program that we're in. And the Norfolk Green Community, one of the folks on that community has reviewed all of the specifics about the building envelope. So they're going to come back and give the town money. And it's a certain dollar per square foot based on the operations of the building. So that's why Steve's firm Vertex has commissioning agents involved, is to make sure not only is it designed this way, but it gets built that way.
Beth Valley, 93 Red Maple. The town meeting in January, is it exclusively for the presentation of this project? Are there other things on the agenda?
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything else.
There's nothing else, it's exclusive.
It's just about this. I am concerned about getting turnout and getting the votes. Do you guys have a campaign in mind, or, you know? You've been focusing on the nuts and bolts of the project, but
Sure, I mean,
there's a big nut out there.
yeah, I mean, we've been trying to do that with, you've probably seen signs around, lawn signs around town. We have the informational boards up. We can certainly post things on the town website and Facebook. There'll be a warrant that gets mailed out to everybody.
Right.
So people will be aware that there's a vote.
And for the town meeting, is there any early votes or anything like that? That's
Not
just
the town meeting.
That's
You
just
have
for
to-
the overall.
You have to show up at town meeting.
And it requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting?
That's correct.
So, okay.
So it'll be like any other town meeting where you'll get something in the mail with the warrant. There'll only be one warrant article.
Donna?
Related, Donna Jones, North Street. This was set up on purpose to get the bids in December and go to town meeting in January. What if we had waited a couple of months to go to town meeting?
Yes.
Does that cost more?
Sure. So first of all, the timing of this was very intentional in that we've been advised that historically speaking, you will get your best construction bids if you bid your project in late fall, early winter, because contractors are setting up their bids for the following spring season. Once you get a bid in hand, you have 30 working days to award it to the contractor. And so the timeline of this was very carefully crafted such that we could bid it now when we think it's advantageous to bid it, and then have enough time to have the town meeting and the debt exclusion, and then engage the contractor if it passes a debt exclusion. Because it was extremely important to us to have the bid in hand at town meeting, we really had to do it this way. I believe that the data that we have is approximately a 1% increase in construction cost for each month that goes by. So if we had waited until May, it's another 5% roughly to the project.
Escalation is running about 12% a year now because of the current market conditions.
So for a lot of reasons, we thought it was very advantageous to do it now. The town meeting, there's no way around it. We have to have the town meeting on one day that people show up at. But the vote, we're hoping that, I mean, obviously the vote's in January 28th, there could be snow, but we're hoping with the early voting and the mail-in voting that people have access to, whoever wants to vote will have access to vote. I think the early voting is 7 or 8 days.
That's a key aspect of this, for allowing people to vote. There's mail-in voting, so if people want to reach out to the town clerk, they could get a mail-in ballot, but as well as the early voting is going to be continuous going up to the election date as well. So.
Yep.
Elizabeth Whitney, 26 Valley Street, Pondville. I love this project and I support it fully, just need to say that. Do you have a sense that folks know the difference between a debt exemption and Prop 2.5?
Probably not.
I have
But the town administrator can explain it.
Well, this goes back to my teaching days in Sudbury, where...
So I can give you my layman's understanding of it, and then Justin can
Well, the
correct me
point
where-
is a debt exemption.
A debt exclusion,
Debt exclusion.
yeah, a debt exclusion is not a permanent tax
Right.
increase.
But Prop 2.5.
Proposition 2.5 is a permanent tax increase. A debt exclusion is a tax increase to fund a specific capital project. Once the project's paid off, that
That's it.
amount comes off the tax rolls.
That would be helpful to explain.
Anything else to add, Justin?
No, I think we've got a good team here. I was a former finance director, and we have Todd, so I think that's
You get
something
that.
we'll definitely say at town meeting as well.
Great.
But that's a great point.
That's
because-
always worrying.
And actually also, Kevin has spoken with a news editor that's doing an article on this project, and they reached out to me. One of the questions was the difference between Prop 2.5 and debt exclusion, so I did mention that.
Because we tangled with this in Sudbury.
And so when we talk about that, after this vote takes place, a couple of years from now, when you're starting to make the payments on this project or any other project you have in town, you do have debt coming off the books. So, that's a good point, because we should also, just consider that, make sure everybody understands that at town meeting, that the reality is, your tax is going to go up for a few years now, and then in the next few years, you've got other debt that's coming off the books, which is going to bring it down some. So, is that right? Yeah.
I had another technical question, I guess. How deep are the bays? Are the trucks, can it accommodate a tandem to?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're 90 feet deep.
90 feet?
Yep.
Okay.
So what you see here is, some of them will be 3. You can get 3 vehicles in here. But the important thing, to get the ladder truck, obviously. The important thing to notice, though, is that what you really have is 6 doors, right? 2 that drive out the back, or I should say 8, right? Because you got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you got 2 that drive out the back, and then these that drive out the front. And that was another important key aspect. Right now, you have 4 trucks, plus the rear doors. And what the chief wanted to make sure we had was every single one of the important response vehicles leave the station immediately. And so right now that doesn't have the opportunity to do that, but in the future, when this station is built, you will have that opportunity. So whether it's an emergency call for an ambulance, a squad vehicle, the ladder truck needs to go, one of the engines needs to go, they're out the door first. So again, it's all about getting that response time down. If we're doing it, let's do it in such a way that benefits is seen by all the residents.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this all works, but if it passes at town meeting and it's voted down for the debt exclusion, what is that? I mean, the project is dead, what happens at that point? I'm afraid the problem is there's school issues coming up that are going to require funding.
Sure.
They have a large group that supports that. If they see this is conflicting with the fire station, the school's conflicting with the fire station in terms of money, I'm afraid when in a closed ballot, it's easy to vote no because nobody knows what you're voting. And I'm afraid that could be a problem. I might be exaggerating.
I mean, there's definitely a risk. That's actually what happened in 2009,
Yes, it is.
was that it passed a town meeting, and I was at the town meeting where it passed, and I mean, it was almost unanimous, and then it lost by 9 votes at the ballot. I mean, it's really, I mean, we're going to make our presentation at town meeting. Again, we have the website where people can find information. What we're hoping is that we can show the school project, when that comes up, is going to be an important project. This is also an important project. They're unfortunately near each other. I don't think they're going to be in the same year, but hopefully people understand the importance of both projects. But yes, it does need to pass both to go forward.
You need a strong, strong campaign. I don't
Yeah,
know how to do that, but I don't think you have it now. Posting a few signs around town, I don't think is enough.
sure.
You need to get people to really feel like they don't want to go forward without
It's
this.
a PR campaign.
You really need a campaign where people can't imagine going forward without it, which is how I feel, and I think people in this room feel.
Sure. And like I said, I mean, we've tried to do as much as we can as a committee. We're a little hampered by, we can get up and talk about the project, how much we love it. We can't pay for signage to say vote for the project, because that's a financial issue. We can't spend town money to say that.
Okay.
That's why it's really, you know, if you're for the project, help us out by you know, spreading the word. And, you know, anybody that is pro the project certainly help spread the word, because, well, we can talk about it, and, you know, I talk about it with the people I know too. We unfortunately can't pay for a sign that says vote for the project.
Oh,
We also can't, by law or ethics, we can't, in essence, go out and use funds and promote the project, or promote with, like, even the signs that we have around town have to be very general. We can't put a slant.
The yellow signs you see around town were actually paid by the union, which is not part of the committee, not the committee. What we were able to produce is what Justin is sitting in front of. The initial pass had a lot more on it, and OCPF that basically regulates this sort of stuff in Massachusetts said you can basically have a website link and a picture of the project. You can't have anything else.
okay. So you're a little hampered in what you're allowed to
To
do.
say the least.
It's a huge concern of mine. I mean, believe me,
That's why, again, if you're pro the project, or there's others here that are pro the project, please let everyone that you know, tell them to come to town meeting, because I think at town meeting, we can make a really strong case to people.
but it's going to be the vote that really.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is.
Don?
Beth, work with me.
Yeah, I know.
We can figure out a campaign.
It seems late, but
Is it door to door? Is it, let's meet in the library and watch this video together and let's discuss it? Whatever we can think of that'll work.
yeah.
At some point, could you cover what it's like for the firefighters currently to be in the trailer? And what does that RMG space provide?
So right now, and I talked about this a little bit last night, you know, I'm very careful about, you know, not trying to promote or give you a doom and gloom picture, but there is a reality picture, okay? The reality picture is your firefighters, I think we all can agree, do excellent work. They are second to none in my opinion. Obviously I'm biased because I lead that group, but you know, I do feel very spoiled by their level of professionalism and their capabilities and what they have done to adapt and overcome, especially looking at the facilities that we're in. To be 100% honest, we are the only fire department in the state of Massachusetts that is using a trailer as housing on a semi-permanent basis. Other places that have trailers, it is literally temporary because the actual building that they're going to move into is under construction. It's not like just there as a semi-permanent solution. The other piece is it does impact our recruitment and retention. So, you know, there are things like, you know, that we work on and that the town has done a very good job of in terms of apparatus acquisition, working on the union contract to make sure the pay is more comparable, and things like that. But there is a huge component to the overall life safety and wellness and well-being of the firefighters that there is no way to address it in the current building. There isn't. The building is not capable of being modified to put proper ventilation in, exhaust remediation in, things to prevent them being exposed to carcinogens from the diesel exhaust and things of that nature. There is no room or place for proper gear storage. So I have firefighters that literally have mold growing in their gear in some cases. I have firefighters whose gear has to be decontaminated just when they come back from vacation because the amount of diesel contaminants is absorbed just from the trucks pulling in and out. So those are things that are not fixable within the current parameters of what the building can do. They just can't be addressed. We cannot put in the proper decontamination zone, the proper hot, warm, and cold zones for us to be able to adequately provide for what NFPA 1500 calls for. So those are things that are concerns of mine that keep me up at night. The other thing is that has already occurred. I have had injury reports. I have injury files, in personnel files from personnel who have slipped and fall or who had suffered slip and fall injuries just traversing from the trailer to the apparatus bay during snowstorms or flash freeze events or rain events. The other thing that the general public may not realize is that it is a hazard just for them to be wet and responding to a fire. So if you think about how you wrap a baked potato in aluminum foil, right? Because it keeps it nice and moist and cooks it, but keeps it from burning. Well, a firefighter in his gear is, and if you are wet underneath, or your gear happens to be wet because there is moisture that gets into the building for the kind of adapted ventilation system or attempt to try to clean the air. There is a ventilation louvers that come on, but it is nowhere near adequate. But what happens when it's raining or when it's cold or when it's snowing, when those open, is moisture drops in on top of where the gear is stored. So on top of coming across a parking lot and being wet, underneath their gear is also wet. When you go into a fire environment and you are wet, you are in essence becoming a baked potato. They will suffer and can suffer steam and compression burns from the heat transfer that the moisture inside the gear absorbs. So those are things that keep me up at night. So I actually have had firefighters come in from the trailer, have to take off the outer layer of clothing to put on their gear to properly respond to a fire event, to prevent themselves from being injured or burned. So those are the kinds of hurdles and obstacles that we are facing on a daily basis, and I haven't even gotten into the living conditions of the trailer. So right now we have 4 people 24/7. The trailer was designed initially for 2 people to be there 24/7. So now we have 4, which means we have now taken what was supposed to be a utility room and locker area and had to adapt it into, it is now a bedroom, but in that bedroom you have to move the bed to get in the utility closet if there's an issue. And when people come in for shift, they have to go into a place where someone is sleeping to get their things and come out and prepare for the shift. When I want to eat lunch with my crews and just break bread, either at the morning breakfast table or, actually it's not possible in the morning because you have shifts going on and off and there's 8 people, so I don't even go out there in the morning because there's no room to even walk. Everybody's bumping into each other, stumbling all over each other. But when I just want to go have a meal, there's no space. It's not possible. We have to take a chair or a side table from what is the living space, which is also the kitchen and dining and living room, but I have to take a chair from there and sit at the table to be able to eat with my personnel. And that's not the end of the world, don't get me wrong, like that's not the end of the world, that's not something that, you know, makes the project, you know, say we actually have to do this, but it's just an example of how cramped and how limited the space is. There's also only 1 restroom facility in a trailer for 4 people. And I also have females on duty. So I have females that are working with males. There's 1 bathroom. When a call comes in the middle of the night, a lot of times you have to go use the restroom to make sure you don't have to do it while you're out on the road. Having limited restroom facilities creates an unnecessary obstacle or hurdle. And The last thing that scares me is when we have covering companies come. So we have very reciprocal mutual aid and automatic aid. All of the communities around us support us, and we go support them. That's what we do. Anytime there's a large-scale incident of any type, we're going to have other towns coming in here to support us, and we go support them. With that being said, when we have a large-scale incident that we respond to, there's usually a covering company that comes in to support us. There is nowhere for them to go that is an appropriate space for them to rest and stage for another response. The first big thing is if it's in the middle of a snowstorm or a rain event, none of their apparatus fit because our bays are too small and too short. So we've actually had that happen where a covering company came, backed into the building and tore a ladder off of their vehicle and caused tens of thousands of dollars of damage, not only to their apparatus, but to our building. But the other piece of that is if they go to the trailer to sit and relax, and we get a call while they're there, and they're coming out of the trailer and they fall and get hurt, we are now liable and on the hook for their injuries. We're also liable and on the hook for the injuries to our firefighters. There are billions of dollars spent every year by the fire service dealing with on-the-job injuries. And in our world, when you have something that is preventable, that is predictable, it's also preventable. Well, in this case, I can predict that someone's going to slip and fall coming across the parking lot in a weather event, trying to respond to an emergency. God forbid, hopefully there's no one in this room, but I'm very limited on what I can do to prevent it. We work tirelessly with DPW. They do a great job. We try to have salt stage and all that, but even with all of that, and with trying to do those things, I still have injury reports from people who have fallen and been injured. There's previous firefighters who have fallen and been injured, and the impact of those injuries has a compounding effect. And unlike a station that has a finite hard cost, those costs can be astronomical and last for the lifetime and the duration of that firefighter or that individual. So those are the things that worry me or that bother me from the standpoint of our facility is overburdened and it's antiquated, and it does not provide for the health and safety and wellness of the people that you are counting on and trusting to come take care of you in the event of emergency. That's the big problem and why I champion so hard for this project and advocate for the needs of your firefighters, because you have a phenomenal fire department. If you took any metrics and compared us or compared your fire department to the fire departments around you and in the Northeast or across this country, you're going to see that we perform at a very, very high level, a very comparable level, if not a superior level to most. And you get a whole lot of return on investment when it comes to the services that your fire department provides. And I'm confident with that, and I can stand on that. These men and women work tirelessly, and quite honestly, it's time, and they deserve to have their health and wellness tended to and taken care of in a better way than what it is now. They have adapted and overcome in a phenomenal way, believe me. They have done all they can do. All that can be done to adapt and overcome to make that facility usable and to make that facility work to provide services is done. There's nothing else that can be done. There isn't. If it could be done, they've thought of it and they've done it. They've converted jail cells to be a sleeping bunk. There all kinds of things have been done to adapt and overcome. There's nothing more we can do.
Battery guys.
That's the message that has to get out. That's the message right there.
Did you cover the proposed sleeping spaces?
The new ones?
Yeah.
So
Like right now,
yes,
we're
so-
dealing with 4.
Yeah, so right now, we routinely, I can give you exact stats if I can go look them up. But we do a fair number, probably, I would say, in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 full recalls a year. We do recalls for ambulance personnel every single day, usually multiple times a day. When those happen, And I'll just give you a hypothetical example, or an example that actually has happened, where we get an ambulance call, say at 11:30 p.m., and it's a pretty hot call, and the ambulance is going to be committed, and they're going to be tied up at the hospital for a little while. We call in supplemental personnel to make sure that the risk factor in town stays low, which means we want to keep 4 people, 4 firefighter paramedics available 24/7. When we do that, you have your on-duty crew, all right? Your on-duty crew has their bedroom or area, their private area staged and set. So when the recall personnel come in, they're not going to go disturb that. That's kind of an unwritten rule in the fire service. You're not going to go mess up or disturb someone else's bunk space. Right now, we have no extra or additional bunk space. So when that hot call comes in, that crew that's coming in at 11:30 at night or at midnight, they have nowhere to put their head. They have nowhere to go rest or stage for the next call. They're left to either sit in what we call our war room, or sit in a recliner and try to catch a few Z's if need be. A lot of times, the recall personnel are just coming off a 24-hour shift that they just worked. So when you talk about the health and wellness and rest, but also the commitment and passion that these personnel have, that's the state of things right now. There's nowhere for them to place them to be. I have to take into account when we do emergency coverage or hold over a shift where I can put heads and bodies. So if we have a major snow emergency and what the industry standard is to hold over additional personnel, I have to think twice if it's an overnight event because I have nowhere to put them. And I have nowhere to put them where they can adequately be ready and refreshed to respond to the incidents. So I have to weigh that into consideration because there is nowhere for them to go. What we have done is we've had to use air mattresses and sleep on the floor. That has happened. I myself have slept on the floor running an EOC in that station because there's nowhere else for anyone to put their head down. There's no space. I've had personnel sleep in a jail cell on an air mattress. Almost every major snow event, I've had something, or major storm event where we've done supplemental coverage. That has occurred. So those are the kind of things that have taken place, and that, when we talk about why is there 9 bedrooms right now? Well, the 9 bedrooms is for future expansion. That's the truth. The 9 bedrooms is for future expansion. Our original program had 5 bedrooms with double occupancy with the ability to put a partition wall in later. And after the feasibility study phase and the detailed design phase, I learned that because of the efficiencies that will be built into the building in terms of HVAC and the room sensors and the lighting and all those components that we talked about for an efficient building and mass saves, it would be astronomically expensive to then come back later and put a partition wall up. So it was much less expensive and better from a cost analysis point of view and a fiscal responsibility point of view to go ahead and put the 9 individual rooms in now. And we will use those 9 rooms day one. No, there will not be somebody sleeping in them every single day or 24/7. But those rooms will get used because right now those people that don't have a place to go lay down, they will be rejoicing that they have a place to go lay down or a place to go lay their head so they can rest staging for the next call. Because right now it's not available. And that's how we see the building being used. That's how we see those spaces that right now, no, I don't have 9 people on shift, but eventually there's probably going to be 9 people on shift. There's a method to the madness. The way we developed the 9 or 10 people or 9 or 10 bedrooms is based off of having 2 fully functioning fire companies and 2 ambulances and a shift commander. So if we have that rolling out of here, we can cover it. And that is what the foreseeable future looks like. It's years down the road, but being at 5 or 6 is not that far down the road. As the demand for service continues to increase, and if the population continues to increase in town, those are things that we have to look at. And there's a very small growth factor built into the building of 5%. And the main area we will be able to grow, or we will need to grow, is in personnel. What we have for our equipment right now is sufficient. We have the proper pumping capacity, the proper water carrying capacity, the right aerial device. those things that we have, we won't need to add more until the town grows astronomically or population density gets to a point where we have to have a new facility and more fire companies on the road. But what we have from an apparatus standpoint right now is sufficient. And the way we staff and deploy services works for the town demographic right now. But as the town grows, that's going to change.
So if there's anything else, if folks have ideas or anything like that, obviously you want to go visit the station, you know, if you know anybody. And then Donna has put together some videos that are on the town website. And that's what you get, right? When you go to the QR code, you can get on there.
So right now there's an existing conditions video.
Yeah.
We have filmed an informational video that runs through a lot of the same information we went over tonight. That will be up there shortly. Again, there's FAQs that if there's questions you didn't think of tonight, it may have already been asked and is answered on the website. I guess, are there other questions?
I just have a question actually for the audience. I'm Seth Hamilton, president of the Norfolk Firefighters Local 4134. I was just wondering what you feel like your neighbors who aren't buying into this might need to see or hear, and how we could go about getting in touch with them to get them to see and hear what they need to change their minds. Because we have some social media pages operating right now. Some family members have put up posts through social media. That's where most of the signs are coming from. We have the sign, people can sign up for these signs to be placed on their lawn. And we just need to know what else people need to hear to change their minds or get them to buy in. Is there any thoughts from the audience here?
Well, we live over at River's Edge, and we're your biggest customers. And block for block, we're your biggest customers. But also, a lot of people there are very financially not looking forward to a tax increase, because River's Edge got hit disproportionately hard in the last 5 years with some unfair tax increases. So we're kind of in a different position. But I think the finances is going to be a big stumbling block. But what Chief just said, if I can get everybody there at River's Edge to hear what he just said, you got to change people's hearts and minds, knowing there's going to be a cost. You can't argue that the cost isn't there. You've got to give them another reason to not imagine that we cannot let this not happen.
Can we organize a day at River's Edge where the union and the chief and the board?
Oh, we'd love to have you. I'm going to be working on the December newsletter real soon.
Okay. We'd love to come up and be able to talk to as many people as can be about it.
I mean, I'm a little fired up right now. But, you know, I'm thinking of fundraising up there to buy signs. But I don't...
Well, you don't need to buy signs. We have plenty of signs.
You got the signs.
We have the signs. We're more than happy to pay for the signs and get them out to everybody.
And we're not allowed to put them on our own properties, but we can get everybody at River's Edge, many of whom have local relatives, to put them on their sign, put them on their lawns, you know, conduct the campaign that way.
Is there somebody here from Pin Oaks?
Yeah. Why don't you hook up with Pin Oaks too?
You feel the same way? That
Yeah.
it's going to be a financial thing that's going to kill it at polls.
It is going to be. Yeah.
And you're going to have to sway people to think that something else is more important than the finances.
So one thing that, it's by no means a doom and gloom, but it's just something that always comes to my mind, is that with the attrition of the older members of the fire service, there goes a little bit of the community is left, where they've grown up here, they've spent the majority of their lives here, and to bring in these new members who are willing to dedicate their lives and their time the way the older members did is very difficult to begin with. So we might get some new members in, and with the idea of a new career, but we will lose them before they even get any experience. So therefore, we're losing massive amounts of experience through attrition of the older members, the retirement, and so on. And then we have new members coming in, and so the service that could possibly be starting to occur would be that you're just not going to get the level. We won't, no matter how hard we all try, would not be able to provide the level that you currently have if that whole system rolls out that way, where it's just a constant in and out, in and out, in and out. No one will be here long enough to give you the years of knowledge and the years of dedication, which makes the difference of why we have the service we have today.
And my time here, just to give an example, there have been 4 people who move on to new jobs for whatever reason. 2 people that I've hired, or actually 3 that I hired, that I brought in, or they were brought in under my leadership. And then there have been at least, 12 others in the past 8 to 10 years, which that's an extremely high rate when you're talking about the fire service to have that much turnover, especially when the department has invested in some of these individuals and trained them or developed them only to go somewhere else. That's basically what happened. We become like a breeding ground or training ground because we have a good reputation. They know what we do training, they know what we do and what we provide as a service, and they know they're getting a low-risk, high-reward product that comes, if it came from Norfolk, it's good.
So your reputation brings them in, and your
Right.
reputation makes them leave.
Yep.
Somebody's offering something that you're not offering.
And that's exactly it.
That's exactly it. I mean, the reality is...
My son owns a landscape business, and it's, everything I'm hearing is echoing. It's every company is running into this. They put a lot of money into training, and they have them like a year or 2, and they're gone. And it's just tough. There's no answer to this.
Yeah. And then I think the thing that the station piece is a big one, because what I do feel like we have from a service perspective is special, and from how tight-knit and family-oriented the organization is. If you fit, it's hard for you to leave, but when you look at a young man or woman who's talking about starting a family, or thinking about things in the fire service that are hot-button topics like health and wellness and those things, and they see the condition they're in, and it doesn't appear to be an end in sight to living in a trailer, to having gear that's so, that makes that decision a little bit easier. Even though we have things that are special here that can hold you here, we can only hold you so long before you start evaluating some of those factors. And it's frustrating for me as a chief to be able to just have to sit and say, hey, hold on, we're working on that. Yeah, we're working on it, but I don't have a guarantee I can offer you. And that part is frustrating, because at that point I feel like I can't compete. Like, if you give me an opportunity to compete, I'm a real competitive guy. My previous career, I competed with the best of them, and I will fight to the dickens, but if I don't have nothing to fight with, I can't win.
And in some cases, the new building isn't going to keep them either.
Yeah. In some cases, it may not. But it certainly would sweeten the deal, especially if, the town is doing a good job trying to address the others with the contract, with the apparatus. Like, those are other things that firefighters look at.
Yeah.
And, we've addressed that, but we kind of got to try to address the condition that they're in from a health and safety standpoint.
And maybe we can end on this, but the cost that you brought up, I think it's important that when you do go out and talk to your neighbors, it's a cost that's going to last for decades. We're talking lifetime, okay? Because one of the things that the committee has asked us to do, the prior select board asked us to do, was build it so that we don't have to go back in 10 or 15 or 20 years and do it again. And I think, you've had some projects in town, and may have some projects coming up where it was done, and now you're doing it again. Because to do it again costs exponentially more money than when you do it the first time. So yes, it's an investment, but the investment on this particular project, the committee has set this up, the way the leadership in the town has set this up, based on lots of lessons learned, is we're doing it right, we're doing it once, because we're not going to do it again.
When you have a voting history in town of 9 votes the first time and 40 votes the second time, the margins are very, very close on votes.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.